Chairman.
Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, I was part of an effort led by Senator Cruz and Senator Shaheen to impose sanctions to stop the building of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. I have to admit, honestly, I was surprised at how unbelievably effective those sanctions were, and it stopped it. When you came before this committee about 5 months ago, I thought you were completely on board with the continued halting of the construction of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. I have to admit, I'm shocked at now the fact that yesterday and today you are conceding the fact that it's going to get built. That would have been really nice to know 5 months ago. When did your thinking change on that?
Thank you, Senator. Again, as we discussed then, unfortunately, construction started on this bad idea in 2018, and when we last spoke, the pipeline was well over 90% complete as a physical.
Yes, and it was quite complete when we imposed sanctions and halted it last time. Why not continue the pause of sanctions? I'm sorry, your explanation literally makes no sense. So now we're conceding the building. We're going to have it constructed, and now we're going to somehow impose what, serious consequences when Germany doesn't live up to providing the revenue relief for Ukraine when Russia does use it as a weapon? As a practical matter, as we looked at this, we all agreed this pipeline is a bad idea. We oppose it. The President has been clear about that for a long time. But as a very practical matter, with inheriting a pipeline that was 95% complete, none of the... We stopped it the last time. Let's move on to Iran.
No, in fact, we didn't, by definition.
Let's move on to Iran. During the debate over the JCPOA, I offered an amendment to deem that a treaty. From my standpoint, that amendment should have passed 100-0. And had it passed 100-0, the JCPOA would have been, first, a far better agreement, and you wouldn't be in a position where from one administration to the next, a president can just cancel another executive agreement. So now you're engaged in further discussions with Iran. I have my doubts that you will end up with a better agreement. It's going to be worse. It'll embolden Iran. Don't you think, first of all, what justification is there, something that is that significant? Again, you take a look at the State Department's own manuals in terms of how it defines a treaty. I think it's quite clear that the original JCPOA was a treaty. Don't you think any agreement that you enter into with Iran should be deemed a treaty and should be ratified in the United States Senate?
Senators, you know, numerous arms control and nonproliferation agreements reached by the United States were not treaties. And there are benefits, you're right, to enshrining something in a treaty. There are also downsides in terms of some of the constraints that it actually would place on us. It's also more complicated when you're dealing with a multi-party agreement, which was the case of the JCPOA. We had, of course, the European partners. We had the Russians, the Chinese, not to mention the Iranians. So looking at the history of arms control nonproliferation agreements, looking at what would give us maximum flexibility, and this was the most effective way forward.
Okay, well, respectfully disagree. Real quick, I did send a letter together with Senator Scott inquiring as to why the State Department ended its investigation regarding the gain of function and the lab leak origination of the coronavirus. I think your response is due on June 10th. I'm hoping you'll respond and provide us the information we're requesting. Are you aware of that letter?
Yes, thank you, Senator. I am, and just to, and we'll certainly respond to that in a timely fashion. But just to, for what it's worth, to try to clear this up, because there's been a lot, unfortunately, of erroneous reporting on this. The study in question, the work in question, was asked for by the Trump administration. They hired a contractor within the State Department to do an internal inquiry into the origins of COVID-19 with a focus on the lab leak scenario. That work was completed. It wasn't terminated.
Okay, so just explain that when you return it to me. I want to move on to another issue. So just respond to my oversight request. Finally, I want to talk about the budget as it relates to what the Biden administration is proposing to spend, I guess, to fix Central America. My first trip down to Central America, it was interesting what the presidents of those countries talked about in terms of problems they were dealing with. And first it was corruption and then impunity. Obviously, I understand corruption. I thought impunity, that's odd. I mean, but what are you talking about there? And the fact of the matter is, they're talking about the fact that the drug cartels are untouchable. And by the way, the drug cartels in Central America, because through our drug interdiction efforts, we stopped, or we certainly redirect the flow through the Caribbean and up to Central America, destroying those societies in many respects. So I don't know what amount of money we can spend in Central America to really address the drug lords. I keep hearing the root cause of this problem is the violence in Central America. I would argue the root cause of the violence in Central America is America's insatiable demand for drugs. So the border crisis, which is the current crisis, is completely the result of the actions that President Biden took when he first entered office, ending the successful migrant protection policy, the agreements with those countries, and quite honestly, not completing the 250 miles of border wall that is bought and paid for. So I listened to Vice President Harris talking about, oh, yeah, we're going to secure the border. I see no evidence of that. So tell me how you can expect a few $100 million or I don't exactly know the exact amount you're really proposing over the next couple of years during this administration of pouring into Central America to try and fix the push factor when the push factor is caused by our insatiable demand for drugs and the flow of migrants. And by the way, the presidents of those countries were pleading with me and on a bipartisan basis to other Senate colleagues, please fix your laws. This isn't good for us to lose our future, to have this outflow of people. We need to rebuild our economies. So please explain how these policies are going to result in anything and how that money isn't going to just be completely wasted in Central America.
Thank you. There are a number of things that we need to do and do it at the same time. We have to have, and we're determined to have, and we will have a secure border. We have to have a rational immigration policies, and we have to deal with these drivers. And I think it's fair to say that folks don't just wake up in the morning in Guatemala or Honduras or El Salvador and say, boy, it would be a lot of fun to just give up everything I know, my family, my language, my culture, my community, take this incredibly hazardous journey, put myself in the hands of coyotes, come to the United States, and the border's closed in any event, and that would be a great thing to do. We know that there are very, very serious things in their lives that are pushing them to take these chances. And these are things that I think we can help address. To your point, you're right. I think there are a number of factors involved. The corruption, lack of good governance, the impunity in terms of violence. The single biggest driver in most places, in my estimation, though, is fundamentally a lack of opportunity, a lack of a job, a lack of a paycheck, being able to put money on the table, feed their families. And this is a place where I think we can have a real impact, working primarily with the private sector, which has to be the engine for these kinds of investments. The government can help and be a catalyst. We need to see that. Of course, governments need to do the work to put in place some of the laws and structures that make private investment more possible. So we're working on that as well. But if, Senator, we don't also deal with these drivers, it's just very hard to overcome the choice that people make to, put their lives in someone else's hands to try to come here. We have to be able to do all of that, and that's where the President's plan go. I'd be happy when, the time comes. This is not just throwing money at the problem. There are and will be serious metrics, serious oversight, serious benchmarks for what we're trying to accomplish. And last thing I'd mention on this, if I can, part of the challenge is that you have governments that we can't work effectively with because of corruption and because of gross mismanagement. Well, we'll be working with others, with the private sector, with civil society, with NGOs, with organizations that do this work, with local communities, as the case may be, to try to make sure that any funds that we ask our taxpayers to dedicate to this are used wisely and effectively and are not wasted. And I really welcome an opportunity to work with this committee on that.
Thank you.